review this game. So the game started with French defense, exchange variation. White took the d5 pawn. So the game will be equalized because this structure is like identical between the two players. So knight c3. Well, my suggestion is move the g1 knight first. Is because in this pawn structure we potentially could push the c pawn at a later stage, and if we move knight to c3, it blocks our c pawn, so it makes us difficult to expand our space at the queen side. So we can move this g1 knight, or more usually white could move the bishop to d3 to control this diagonal, and therefore black cannot move the bishop to f5. So move the knight, move the bishop, castle, and then let's see what would happen. And knight c3, knight f6, knight f6 good, and knight f3, c5. So black start to attack the center, but to be honest, this move is a little risky because pushing upon the c5, there are some weakness we need to be aware. One is the d5 pawn. If black take the pawn, the d5 pawn will be an isolated pawn. And right now, white have two pieces attacking at d5. And we also have two defenders at d5, but this would make us make black passive. And also black could move bishop to g5 to ping our knight, so which will make the defense on d5 even harder. And also the c5 move actually makes the knight c3, the move earlier I commented as not the best move. So I mean the c5 move make this move make more sense, because now the d5 become a weakness. Another thing is this diagonal. So white could attack our king, and if white play bishop b5, bishop d7, and bishop g5, this is what I said. The knight is pinned and the d5 pawn is weak, so the d7 bishop is blocking our pawn. And if we take the bishop and white take the bishop, and so yeah, how can we solve this pin knight? If we play a6, that's not good because knight go back, the pawn will have big trouble. If bishop e7 first, and we can take the pawn, and if we castle, and we can castle, so I think it's very hard for us to take the pawn, because after the exchange, white will trap the rook, or if you take with the pawn, the king will be exposed. So there will be a lot of tension around the center. My point is black can hold pushing the c pawn to c5 later, once our king reach to the GA square, and also when we feel more prepared, like we have more pieces developed. After that, then we can push the pawn to c5. So the best move turned out to be bishop d6, just develop pieces and castle. So c5, white play bishop g5, and that's good, pinning the knight, bishop e6, yeah, black is protecting the pawn, but as I said, bishop b5, and there will be a problem. If we move the bishop back, the d5 pawn is hanging. I mean, it's not that. I mean, we cannot take the pawn right now because we'll lose the bishop. But what about we check the king? And if we move bishop to e7, then we can take the knight, and you will have double pawn, and the king side is exposed. So take this pawn, you cannot take it back because it's pinned. So there will be problem at the center. And if you play knight to c6, these two knights are pinned. This is passive, and we can castle. Bishop e7, we take the pawn. It's the same problem. I cannot take the pawn because I can take this one because there's a knight d5. And we take that, the king side is exposed. So during this game, white played bishop d3, and that is a little problem because after c4, this is a really good move. Black can do two things with this move. First is kick the bishop back to e2. Bishop at e2 has a worse position than d3. Another thing is black expand its space at the queen side, so which makes attacking the queen side easier for black. Bishop e2, bishop e7, castle, castle. Now black turned out to be slightly better. b3, and black wants to exchange with the pawn, but we need to be aware of the c file. So if black take the pawn, the c file will be semi-open, and the c2 pawn will be a weakness. So instead, I think white can expand space at the king side, or attack on the center. So maybe there's something like knight e5, f4, f5, bishop f3. So we are basically doing two things. First is expanding our space at the king side. So if you attack on my queen side, that's fine. You have a lot more space at the queen side, but I can expand my space at the king side. And I can improve my piece position, like the bishop from e2 to f3 to attack d5. So this is what I would think about. 1 second. Okay, so yes, so expand our space at the king side and improving piece position. So what did white do is push the pawn to b3. I understand the point that we want to exchange with the c4 pawn. This pawn looks really irritating because it controls d3. You cannot move the bishop. But we need to be aware of the weakness after b3. First of all, knight is hanging, and also the c2 pawn will be a target once the c file is opened. So black take the pawn. I think black can maybe move the queen first to attack the knight, because the knight is hanging, as I said. And if bishop go back to d2, the bishop is coming from a very active position to a passive one, and potentially we can give it a knight. So there's no like discover attack, but we can keep pushing b5 with the help from the queen and b4. Yeah, this is just some idea, but maybe we don't like the queen targeted by bishop. Yeah, that's fine. Or maybe bishop to b4. Adding pressure at the knight, and later knight c6, rook c8, and then we can open the c file. So my point is, we don't have to open up the semi-open file. I know this is a very good file, but we can probably open it once we move a rook and a queen, place a c file, and then open that. Yeah, but I also see there is some tension that white is going to exchange our pawn. Yeah, maybe white is going to take our pawn, and but I don't see that's a problem. If white take the pawn, white is having a semi-open file, but I think we can protect this b7 very well, and the d4 pawn will be a target because the d5 pawn is removed. Okay, take the pawn. It's not a big problem. I'm just analyzing or comparing different choices. Knight d7 and knight c6 also can be considered because we can move knight to b4. And as I said, the c2 pawn is the target. Knight c6, knight b4, the a pawn is gone. It cannot kick our knight to b4. And also knight is supported by bishop, so white cannot really move the knight, kick the knight away. And also rook to c8. So we have a knight, a rook. So we need to involve as many pieces as possible to attack the weakness. So knight d5. And here we can actually move the bishop back to d3. I assume that's the reason we want to remove the c4 pawn. a6, make the a pawn safe. So we can actually move the rook c8. Attack the knight first. And if the knight moves to a4, the problem is a7 is gone. So if the bishop go back to d2, and then we can play a6. We make the bishop like passive at d2. So this is about the order of moves. Yeah, bishop f3 is good. Bishop f3 is good. Attack d5, but we can make this move without moving the b pawn. We can still attack d5 before we push the b pawn. H6, exchange, rook e1, bishop e4. This is good. Pinning the knight. Rook e3. That's the only move. We exchange the knight. Maybe we want to remove the attacker on the pawn, but actually the pawn is quite safe. We have 3 pieces protecting that. So I'm still thinking we need to move the rook and the queen, or maybe the rook first to adding pressure on the knight. Because if I look at these pieces, I think the bishop is more active than the knight. And imagine once we move the rook to c8, bishop to f5, we want to attack the c2 pawn. And if white protect the pawn at rook c1, we can attack the rook from this dark square bishop. So I think the dark square bishop is useful. So or we can exchange it when we have to. I don't think this is the best timing we exchange with the knight. And also after exchanging the knight, we make the rook to a good position, right? Rook at e3 is passive. It doesn't have a very clear path. But when the rook moves to c3, this path is very clear. Rook c8. And the same reason, I don't think white should exchange with the rook. So we don't trade for the sake of trade. So there must be some other reason behind it. So this trading only makes the black queen to a better position because this is the semi-open file. And I think the best move, or I mean better move than taking the rook, could be queen d2. Because if you take my rook, I can make my queen at the center, or at the c3 to controlling the c5. So we need to improve our positions little by little with exchanging pieces, for example. So don't trade pieces for the sake of trading, okay? So we need to have some reason behind it. Or even move the rook back to e3, I think it's better than taking the rook. So yeah, so I think because if you look at the black perspective, it cannot move the rook to c3. Our rook can protect c3. And once we take the rook and we play queen e2, that's a problem because the black queen moves to c3. That's a huge, strong piece. The black queen at c3. We lost the control of c3 after trading the rook and queen e2. I think the best move turned out to be queen d2. We can protect the pawn and also protect c3. If you look at the evaluation bar when we move the queen to e2, it suddenly dropped to -1. And black started to be better. And queen c3, that's a very good move. Rook d1, we don't want to protect d4. So now the queen is attacking 2 pawns. So rook c8, yes, that's good. So the next question for black is, black already has a clear target to aim at. The next question is, how can we involve as many pieces as possible to attack the weakness? So there are 2 weaknesses. This pawn is a dark square pawn. We cannot move our light square bishop to attack that. If we move the knight, how can we maneuver the knight? Maybe place the knight at c3, c6, but it will block the rook. And also, it's not easy to move the knight to c6. And white has a knight at e5. The knight will be traded. What about knight to f5? I don't think it's easy to move knight to f5 either. So I will skip d4 as the first target. But look at the c2. This is a light square pawn. So potentially, I think if I move bishop to f5, I can attack c2, right? I don't think there's any way white can defend c2. White also have a light square bishop, but since the pieces are awkwardly placed, so white cannot move bishop to d1. Maybe knight d3 is the only move. And so these three pieces are stuck all together. How can we keep attacking the queenside? I have two solutions. One is we can probably create a pass pawn. Because white pieces have to protect c2, I don't think white has a chance to stop the a pawn. If white wants to stop the a pawn, the rook or the queen have to move to the a file, and then we can win the c2. So this is another way we are adding pressure on our opponent. And another thing is, I'm thinking, can we move rook to e8? Because we are attacking the queen. If the queen goes to d1, that's a problem. Because we take, if you take with the pawn, I can take d4 or even b3, because there's a background problem. So the pawn structure is destroyed. Black will win at least one pawn. And if you take with the rook, that's an even worse problem. That's a checkmate. So yeah, so we can move rook to e8. If knight go back to go back to e5, I think there is a tactical opportunity. We can take the pawn and queen d4. We can win the knight. So we can win 2 pawns. So black is better. So I think the learning is, at this position, we already be active than our opponent. The question is, how can we further attack the weakness? We should involve many pieces possible and be sensitive of tactical opportunities. Okay? So if we queen a1, this looks aggressive, but actually it's easy to defend. Queen d1, and we exchange the queens. I don't think exchange the queens is a good idea, because when we look at the position of these 2 queens, I think the black queen is way better than the white queen. It has 2 targets to be aiming at. And trading the queen favors white. So knight e4. I think black still have chances to attack the c2 pawn. Rook d3. Yeah, I think this is the best move. Oh, exchanging the rooks. Why do we do that? I think this rook is super good than the d3 knight. If you look at the squares, the rook is controlling. The white rook is only controlling this rank, but there is no target on this 3rd rank. So our rook is attacking c2, which makes the bishop has to stay at d1. White cannot push the pawn, so the pawn will be a weakness for a rather long time. So we need to think about, we should spend time to think about what is the best move. So I have 2 suggestions. One is move the bishop to f5 to attack this diagonal, and if you have a chance, we can move the knight, so clear the path for the bishop, and maybe maneuver the knight to b5 or even a3, bishop to f5. So we need to think about a plan to attack the weakness. And another thing is, what about knight c3? We want to exchange the knight and take the c2. How can white deal with that? Maybe move the bishop back to f3, and we can move the rook, attack the knight, attack the rook. If the rook goes to d2, can we move knight to b1, and we can win the pawn. If we can win in the pawn, that's a huge advantage. And also we can push the pawn. If we have knight at c3, we can keep pushing this pawn to create a pass pawn. I'm definitely sure the pawn will be super powerful. And look at the position of the rook. the rook cannot remove. All the squares are controlled by black pieces, and the c2 pawn cannot move. So I think black can push the a pawn to get a pass pawn to maximize the advantage. And knight is also defending d5. The knight is perfect here. So yeah, so that's my comment of this game. So I think after trading the rook, the game become very equalized. Maybe we can, yeah, bishop f5 to attack the pawn, but knight d3, yeah. Oh wait. Okay, so yeah, I think we have plenty of time to calculate. I think taking the knight is the best move, and then we can move the king because our king has a very good path to reach d6 to protect d5, but the white king cannot move to e2. The knight controls this pawn square. King e1 and knight b5. We can win the pawn. The dark square pawn is hanging, and there's nothing white can do about it. And the thing is, when the knight moves to d4, the square is super good. It attacks the pawn, attack the bishop. Bishop to d1 and king c5. We can move the king even further to b4. So all the dark squares are weak squares, and white cannot do anything about it. So if I move the king to e3, I can create a pass pawn. My king can protect the knight forever. Your light square bishop is stuck here. Yes, so that it is.